Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. I am so glad you're listening today. Thank you so much for checking out this podcast. If you're new, welcome. If you've listened for all the episodes, thank you for listening to all the episodes. Hey, don't forget to stick around for the very end. That's where we have our kids only segment where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. Well, how many of you are so excited for no more school? That's right. This week was my kids' last week in school, and we are thrilled to be done and into our summer break. So I think we should all give a cheer for no more school. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Did you cheer really loud? I feel like you did. Okay, good. Now, if you are still in school or you go to a year-round school, I'm very sorry to rub it in. Keep studying, okay? Woo for studying. Okay. That sound effect is going to come in handy. Well, we have a great show today. My guest is Christie Penner Worden, and she is the kids pastor at WMB Church in Waterloo, Ontario. That's in Canada, US's northern neighbor. Having dreamed of being a pastor since she was 12 years old, she is living evidence that dreams come true. Christie is incredibly impassioned by the imagination and faith that is hardwired into kids. She gets super excited about sharing vision with grown-ups, igniting a spark for serving kids in innovative ways, and blazing a trail for kids to step onto with kingdom purpose. She is also a speaker, author, and considers herself a rainbow unicorn because she sees in Technicolor, lives out loud, and celebrates God's exuberant creativity every day. Here is my conversation with Christie Penner Worden. Christie, thank you so much for being on the Collide Kids podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to share your story. And would you just introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Christie. I'm a kids pastor in Waterloo, Ontario. So I'm Canadian.
Awesome.
And I live in a little tiny village. If there's any parents that have ever watched Gilmore Girls, my village is exactly like Stars Hollow.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, we got a puppy recently and named her Suki for that very reason.
Oh, that's
the character
nice.
on the show is
Yes.
Suki St. James, but our little town is St. Jacobs. And so her name is Suki St. Jacobs. We have 6 chickens and they give us eggs every day. So we have like a little tiny hobby farm here and we love it. It's just a little village. And I live here with my husband, Matthew, and we have 3 kids together, Ruby, Benaiah, and Elliot. So Ruby is a teenager. She's in high school. And Ben will be a teenager in 2 weeks. He's grown up real fast. And our youngest, Ellie, she's 10. So she's in grade 5. We say grade 5, not 5th grade.
Oh,
So,
okay. That's like a Canadian thing? Okay.
That's a Canadian thing, yeah.
See, and then sometimes like our college students will say, I'm in 14th grade.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. And we don't say like junior or sophomore. We say like first, second, third, fourth year in university and college. Yeah.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I love that. Well, okay. First of all, tell me about your chickens. Like, how did you get started in chickens? That's amazing.
So we actually bought this house during COVID. We knew that we were moving. And so we just started looking for what would a dream house look like for us. And so this house was built in 1898. It has squeaky floors and squeaky stairs and really sweet little things that feel like, for me, that I've entered into a movie every day when I come home. And the house came with a chicken coop. And I got to tell you, there is nothing useful about having a chicken coop in your backyard if you don't have chickens.
Right.
It just takes up space. So there's a hatchery right up the hill from us, and we went and checked it out and asked lots of questions. And then I said, how many colors of chickens do you have? And they said, why on earth would that matter? And I said, well, if I'm going to have chickens hanging out at my house, I want them to be interesting, and I want to be able to tell them apart. And this was all wildly unimportant to the people that owned the hatchery. But we ended up with 6 ladies. We have Gladys, Lucy, Mildred, Myrtle, Dorothy, and Daisy. And they all give a different color egg. So they're all normal eggs on the inside, but we have blue eggs and a few white eggs, and then all different shades of brown eggs. It's really fun and delicious. They're delicious.
I was about to say, I bet they taste awesome just because they're so fresh.
Yeah,
that is so cool. I love that you picked the colors. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we start into your story today, I really want to, I always like to start off by asking my guests to share a joke or something fun, since it's a podcast for kids. So do you have a joke you want to share with us today?
I sure do. And I'm known as a unicorn, that people call me a unicorn. I'm pretty sure that's just because I'm a little bit crazy and probably a little too old to play like a kid like I do, but I don't care. So when I like to introduce myself, I like to also say that I'm a speaker, an author, and a unicorn. And so I have a few little tricks up my sleeve when it comes to jokes, but I'd love to ask you if you know something that has a horn but doesn't honk.
No, I don't.
A unicorn. Although I've never heard a unicorn fart, so maybe they do.
Well, there you go. It might make a honking noise. That's amazing. Awesome. And I love that people call you unicorn. Why is that?
So I am extroverted. I like to live out loud. I'm comfortable living out loud, but sometimes that doesn't always make other people feel comfortable. I think sometimes they wonder if I know how outlandish or out loud I can be, and I'm fully aware. And so one person, one time, they were trying to be gentle, I think, and just saying, you're kind of standing out. And they said, you're a bit of a unicorn. And as I walked away from that, I realized that they weren't really being kind when they said that. And they were trying to invite me to be different than I am. And so I had to sit with that. I prayed about it. I cried a little about it. And then I decided to buy every unicorn t-shirt I could find in kids' stores. I'm not very big, so I can fit into kids' clothes. And so I have like flippy sequin shirts with unicorns. I started wearing a unicorn horn on Sunday mornings to hang out with the kids. And I just thought, you know what? Let it be so. Let it be so that anybody else that doesn't fit into the room knows that there's a place for them too. And so now it's a bit of a gold star for me, but it didn't start out that way. I had to redeem it. I had to bring it around and make it fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people have a tendency to say things and their intention is not to be mean or to be rude. They're trying to get you to be a part of the group. And so there is some kindness underlying in that. But like you said, it's hurtful sometimes because it goes against who we are. So tell us, like, what is it about your story that is about how God has made you?
Sure. So I have grown up always knowing Jesus. I don't remember a time when I didn't know Jesus. And I love reading the Bible. I love digging into what he says, not just about who he is and his story, but about who I am. And so as I was growing up, I was just the way I am now. I was extroverted. I was loud. I spoke my mind, and that too can sometimes be unkind. And there's learning in that for me as well.
Yeah.
But I found that often living out loud led people to call me bossy or tell me to learn to know my place or to only speak when spoken to. And then I would look at boys who were similar in personality or in their outgoing nature, and they were called leaders. And I couldn't understand why the same things weren't true for me. Why can't I be a leader? Why can't those things be good for me? And I remember spending a lot of time with Jesus, asking him, what was wrong with me and why I couldn't fit in, or why I couldn't be like the little girl people wanted me to be, instead of the way he made me to be. And my mom always raised me to believe that God would use my voice, because there was a lot of it. I've always had kind of a raspy, crackly voice. Even when I was, oh, here comes an icky word, when I was just about to go through puberty, and we talked about a voice changing, and you listen to maybe big brothers have a voice change, or friends at school, their voice gets wonky. Those boys go through a really difficult change. I prayed that I would go through a voice change and get a girl voice, that I would get a really sweet, girly voice that people would like the sound of. And it didn't happen. That isn't true for girls. We don't get that part of the deal. And so it was always a source of confusion for me. And even in the church, there wasn't a place for me in the way I was wired. And it was people trying to help me find a place, but the places didn't fit with who I think God made me to be. When I was around 12, I remember God telling me that he was going to make me a pastor, that he wanted me to be a leader in the church. Wow. And I remember realizing that that wasn't possible in the church I was in, that there wasn't space for a girl to do that. So I said to my mom, when I grow up, I want to be the first female pastor. And I could see the look, like as a kid, you look into your parents' eyes and their mouth is saying something different than their heart.
Yeah.
And she said, well, you can't be the first because someone's already done it and it can't be here. So we're going to have to figure that out. Mm. And over the course of the next 30 years of my life, God would work really hard to help me figure that out. And I got really confused along the way sometimes. But I remember receiving a certificate in the mail when I was 42, so exactly 30 years later, that said I was fully credentialed as a pastor in my church. And that it wasn't so much that I needed the piece of paper, it's that I realized in that moment that God's promises are always true, that he does what he says he's going to do, and he is who he says he is, and I am who he says I am. I went to university not to be a pastor. So I took the long way around on that story God was writing. But I actually got a degree in voice performance. Wow. I now say that God has been my vocal coach my whole life, and he's still using my voice. So my bachelor's degree says voice performance on it, which is just a really fancy party trick because it's a degree in opera. So I can sing all kinds of crazy things, and it's a lot of fun.
How cool. What was that experience like when you said you were 12 years old and you heard God tell you that you were going to be a pastor one day? What was that experience like? Was it like within a church setting, or was that at home? Like what happened when God spoke to you in that moment?
Yeah, I'm so glad that I remember it clearly, because when people say God told me, it's really like, what do you mean? Not everybody experiences God's voice the same way. So I'm always curious about how other people hear from God. And for me, I never wanted to be a kid. I thought being an adult looked so much more interesting. So I would go to adult church. Even when the kids would go to kids' church, I would sit and listen to the speakers because I really wanted to learn, like, how do you know the Bible that well? Like, how do you know this stuff? And I would sit and take notes, and like I can go back and see, my squishy little hand holding a pencil, taking down these notes in the pew next to my mom. And this gentleman was articulating what it meant to be a light in the world, and that there is no point in being a flashlight in a brightly lit room, that we come to church to recharge our batteries and then we take our light out into the world with us.
Yeah, I like that.
And it was such a beautiful, like I got it. Like it was a picture I could actually see in my mind. And in that moment, my experience wasn't, oh yeah, I want to take my flashlight into the world. It was, I want to teach other people how to take their flashlight into the world. I want to do what he's doing. I want to help other people have the same aha moment that I just had with him. So while it did teach me to take my light into the world, the experience of it was, I want to do that. And I felt it was, there's warmth when the Lord speaks. There was a calm. And honestly, it was just such a confident sense that one day I would get the chance to lead other people to rightly see themselves in the kingdom. And I wanted that job when I looked at him. And I wanted God to speak to me in a way that would lead other people to turn their flashlights on in the world. And it was so clear. I think that's why it felt so confusing after, when I thought, why would you say this to me, God, if I'm not allowed? And so that was the long journey of trusting that he means what he says. He means what he says, and he says what he means. And that his word does not return void, that if he says it, he will do it. And people can get in the way of that all the time. And they can get in the way for great reasons. They, like we talked about earlier, they can be kind. They can be hopeful and helpful in helping you steer your story. But they're not always right. They're not, and they don't always agree with God. And so whenever I'm trying to figure out if I've heard from God, I have to ask myself, well, does it sound like something he would say? Does it sound like something that he would want me to do? Does it agree with what we know about God's character and his nature? And the cool thing is, some things aren't clear in scripture, but his character and his nature are super clear. So we never have to guess what he is like. And so when we're hearing from him or experiencing his presence, if it looks or sounds or feels like that nature and character of God that we see in scripture, it probably is.
Yeah. I ask you that because I know for me, I've had very significant moments in my life, where God spoke to my heart in such a distinct way. And I remember there was one instance where I was looking around like, did anyone else hear that? Because it was such this strange moment. And I was at a baseball game. So I wasn't sitting in a church service. It was God was dealing in my heart and doing something at a baseball game. And so I love that God can speak to us in any capacity. He can speak to us in any moment. And I love what you just said about how we can learn what it is, like how we can tell that it's God's voice. So what is it about your voice that you think made it so like you wanted to share your voice with others? Like why do you think God called you to this? We'll be right back after this. Raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
I needed my noisiness to make sense in some way. I've always had lots to say, and I don't want to talk just for the sake of being heard. I want to join a conversation. And so I think some of the most painful experiences in my life is when I don't feel included in the conversation. And so as a result, I think God's given me eyes to see who's missing from the conversation. And so I try to use my voice to find those who haven't been included in the story yet, and eyes to see who's not here yet, and ears to hear for the voice that hasn't been heard from yet. And I use my voice to advocate for the not yet seen and the not yet heard. And because I'm loud and I speak with good purpose, and I'm confident that if the Lord has asked me to lead in a certain way, that he has equipped me to do it, then I can also invite people to wait for someone to get to the table, or to build a chair that fits at the table, or to make room at the table. And so I try to use my voice for the sake of the ones that aren't being heard and don't have voice yet. And I think that happens to kids a lot.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
my heart for kids is really to get them at the table, because when I think about Jesus saying, unless you become like one of these, um, and he's pointing to the kids in front of them, you will not enter the kingdom of God. I wonder what it is about those kids that God was trying to point out in adults, or for adults, to say, you're missing this.
Yeah.
And I really think it's curiosity and wonder. I think kids ask some of the best questions.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And I don't think they're afraid to ask those questions.
Right.
They're often confident in their curiosity, and somehow learning to adult looks like outgrowing that curiosity sometimes, or learning to say less, or, oh, maybe that's just me.
Or I
And
should already know this.
right. Yes. I love answering kids' questions with, I don't know. Let's find out together. Because their eyes see sometimes at a different height, sometimes from a different angle. Sometimes their eyes are looking for different things than I am. And I'm curious about what they're seeing. I'm curious about what they don't yet know. I'm curious about how we can go together. And we get nervous as adults that, well, I should know this already, or I went to school, I have an education, that doesn't sound very smart. And we are hard on ourselves as adults. But I think some of the smartest answers I've ever heard is, I don't know, or I'm not sure. And we get to be humble and sit in wonder together. And we can either look for the answers together or pray for the answers together if we can't find the answer.
Yeah.
So that curiosity and wonder needs voice. It needs voice in our lives. And kids help us find that voice as grown-ups.
Absolutely. I totally agree. What is it about your personality that you feel like people thought was a negative, that you like, because you talked about that earlier about how you had to overcome kind of what people thought about who you were. So what were those things about you that you felt were negative?
I think a lot of it sounded opinionated or even arrogant. When you speak with confidence, sometimes you don't leave room for correction. And so I've learned that gentleness is a really important skill, and gentleness doesn't have to take away from my confidence. Gentleness allows other people to go with me. And so even like the word bossy was probably true. Like, I was a leader, but I was being bossy. I had a good idea. I wanted to do it my way. I knew it would work if I went my way. And when it didn't, it made me mad. And so learning to curb the emotions by working together with others helped me tune my voice to the ones around me as well. If I'm being bossy or arrogant or out loud for the sake of being heard, then my voice is for me. That voice serves me. But when my voice asks a question or asks for clarification, like, oh, why do you think that? Or what did you hear? Maybe I misspoke. Can I clarify? Asking questions like that invites the other person to go with me and invites me to learn something that maybe I'm doing wrong, or we could do it better together. That your ideas with my ideas are going to make this idea the best it could be.
Yeah, I love that. I've done a lot of different studies and research and read books about personalities and different, like the Enneagram and the DISC and like all these different types of personality things. And as I learned more about myself, which was good, I needed to learn about myself, but it also helped me learn about others, because for some reason, not everyone thinks the same way I do. And I think about things really well. So I was always shocked by that people don't think the way I do. They think differently. And so learning about myself kind of also lended itself to having more compassion for other people and being able to see, like you were saying, like my voice can step in and advocate or help or be useful, whereas someone else might not want to step in or speak up. So I love that we're as we continue to grow, we're going to learn more and more about who God made us to be and how that lends itself to helping others and essentially glorifying God, right?
Absolutely. And as I've learned that about my voice, that my voice can include or it can exclude. It's that learning that led me to look for the one that's not at the table. And as I've learned about other people's personalities, I've learned that they have something to say that makes us better. And if I can understand the way that they're thinking by listening really well, then I don't have to have all the answers by myself.
Right.
And
Take
what
some pressure
motivates
off.
them. Absolutely. And like, what motivates them? What's their heart behind that? They're not just disagreeing with me to be oppositional necessarily. They're not saying no because they don't like me. They might have something to offer that I hadn't thought of, because I thought of things my way with the best skills I can bring to the table. But that's just one way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's why God created us all differently, so that we can all share in this glory and giving God worship and giving God glory in what we do and how we do it together.
Absolutely. Yes. And I love that scripture is clear that we were all created in God's image.
Right.
So the way that you look like our Heavenly Father is going to be different than the way I do. But if I don't see you as an image bearer, I miss out on some of who God is and what He wants to teach me and show me, and how He wants to love me through you and through each of His children.
Yeah, that's so good. What would you say to a kid or someone who's listening right now who they've been described as loud or bossy, or they have a lot of personality or things like that? How would you encourage them right now?
So I would tell you to, if you can read, find Psalm 139 in the Bible, because there is a verse right in the middle of that psalm that says, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God knit you together inside your mama, and He did that on purpose. He didn't make a mistake. He loves you just as you are. And those characteristics in you that are showing up in some ouchy ways for others, He wants to have His way with them. And when you say yes to Jesus' way, He redeems all of those parts of our character. So some may say bossy, but God says leader. Or some may say loud, and He says glorious. He redeems those words and makes them purposeful in His kingdom. The pinch point, though, the ouchy bit, is that you're going to have to go His way.
Yeah.
And so being loud, living colorfully, living fully transparently, where people just know how you feel and know, like, what they see is what they get.
Yeah.
That's a gift. You are showing people yourself, and that's a gift to your community. And they don't get to change the way God wrapped you up in your skin, with your voice, with your talents, but you can use all of it for God's glory. So I would say to you, if you're using your voice for God's glory, if He's given you a story to tell, and if your voice sounds like love, gentleness, kindness, wisdom, self-control, joy, those are things our voices are meant to declare into the kingdom. And so use your voice for good purpose. If your voice is used for confusion or tearing down or anger or hurting someone, that isn't how God gave you that voice. It's not what He gave it to you for. And so the learning is in separating, why am I loud, from the fact that I'm loud or out loud or talkative, chatty, full of stories. It's a gift to your community when you let them in so close. And those of us who are super chatty, we're showing you who we are all the time with our words. And so the invitation to the grown-up, or to you as a friend, if you have somebody who's like that in your life, is listen well. They've been really open with you. How can you enter into their story?
Yeah.
Because they're constantly telling it.
Yeah, that's so good and so encouraging. So encouraging to me. I'm sure anyone that hears this that seems to be that way. You know, I was called bossy a lot because I was the firstborn and I was always the babysitter, the teacher. You know, I always stepped in. So just to recognize that those things about me that I sometimes felt were like, oh, I got to work on that, or that's something that's wrong with me. But to embrace it differently is to see it that this is how God created me and he can use it, like you said. So I love that. That was so encouraging. Thank you for sharing that. Well, this has been
Yeah.
so good, Christy. Thank you for your heart on this and teaching us more about or encouraging us to use our voices. I always like to end the show by asking my guests to share a memory from when they were a kid. So do you have a memory you want to share with us?
Yeah, I have a weird one. So I
Okay.
said earlier that I really didn't like to be a kid. So I spent most of my time pretending to be a grown-up. So when
Okay.
I got into my 20s, I decided I needed to learn how to be a kid. And so I had my childhood in my 20s. So, and the one thing I hated as a kid was being dirty or sticky, which, if we're honest, childhood is all about being
Being
dirty and
dirty.
sticky.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was never dirty and sticky. And so I knew that was something I was going to need to embrace. So when I was about 24 years old, I had read this super fun book that was written by a grown-up woman, but she wrote it in crayon. And this was sort of the beginning of me unpacking the possibility of being grown up differently. And she said, if you need to learn how to play, eat a mango. And so she gave instructions on how to eat your first mango. And the first instruction was get naked. The second instruction was get in the bathtub. And the third instruction was get into it. And so I did that. I lived alone at the time. I was a city girl. I lived in downtown Toronto. And I booked some time one afternoon to go through this. And if you've ever eaten a mango just off the pit, it is so juicy and sticky and messy. And I'd never had one before because I didn't even know how to get into it. But I did it. I got into it. And the last thing she said was, let the juice drip down your arms. That's why you're going to need the bath. And so I just let it cover me. And the sweetness of that fruit and the messiness of it caused me to giggle from a place inside of me that I don't remember ever giggling. And that was the first time I played with my food. And it changed the way I saw so many opportunities that if I stopped avoiding getting dirty and stopped avoiding getting sticky, I would find delights that I had been avoiding all along.
So you were actually in your 20s when you learned
Yeah,
how to play. That's
right. Yeah.
So that's your kid memory. I love that.
That's my kid memory. Yeah.
Well, this is awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. How can our listeners connect with you further?
So I have a website. It's ChristiePennerWorden.com. That's my name. And I have different sections on it that I'm growing. Some are for parents. I like to write articles to support parents and go with them. I've done some parenting classes for disciples, discipling your kids at home, so making disciples at home. And then there's sometimes some kid resources in there. And then also for people who lead kids. How to connect with them and how to see them. It's that eyes to see piece. So what am I missing and how can I see? I love to write. I have a particular interest in writing about sheep and shepherding because Jesus talked about them so much. So you'll see lots about sheep and shepherding there too. But you can send me something on there. My email address is on there and we can connect that way online.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so good. Well, you have really encouraged me today, and I know you've encouraged a lot of people. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been way too much fun for one afternoon.
Wow, that was so encouraging and just the thing I think I needed to hear today. So many good points. I love the questions she asked when she was trying to figure out if she was really hearing from God. She said there was 3 things. Does it sound like something God would say? Does it sound like something God would want me to do? And does it agree with what we know about God's character and nature? You know, we don't always understand everything in the Bible, but like she said, we never have to guess what God is like. She also talked about making sure we use our voices for a good purpose, looking for people who are not included, and using our voice or our personality or our talents as a way to help people feel included. I love that. That was so encouraging. Well, in case you need some more encouragement on any of these subjects, there's some other great episodes of the Collide Kids podcast that I would love for you to check out, like the one about being brave with Sissy Goff. That was episode 25. There was also one about how to stand up for your friends and using your voice in that way. And that was with Nisi Kilgore in episode 10, and how to speak love with Flavia Silva in episode 18. So if you have some time while you're traveling this summer, or if you have some time today, why not check out one of those episodes? Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So I'm really excited to introduce you to my friend, Ayza.
Hello, my name is Ayza and I am 7 years old, and my favorite verse is, how great is the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called the children of God. 1 John chapter 3 verse 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayza. That was so good. Well, I would love to hear from you guys. If you'd like to be on the podcast, I'd love to hear your favorite Bible verse, or maybe a joke that you love, or an encouraging quote that you like from a book or a movie. You can find all the information about how to send me the recording of you doing something like what Ayza did today through my social media. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast, or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. I'd also love to hear from you. So come check out my new website. It's thecollidekidspodcast.com. I'd love for you to subscribe and follow this podcast so that new episodes will automatically load each week into whatever podcast app you're using. And leave a rating and a review. That really does help other people find out about the show so they can listen too. Well, I hope you have a great summer break. I hope you enjoy this Memorial Day weekend and have an awesome summer. If you are traveling, check out some episodes you haven't listened to yet, like the ones I recommended earlier. And remember, God made you just the way you are, and He wants you to shine bright. Well, in case no one has told you today, let me be the first to remind you that God loves you so, so much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news, because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be, because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.